Hi guys, I'm Lauren from Lauren Watkins Art, and today we will be discussing paint and specifically watercolor paint. About once a week I get asked about what watercolor paints would be good for this person or their child and how to know when it's time to kind of move them up in quality. And so it got me thinking about how to know what paints are the best fit for you, when do you know when it's time to move up? And just all the different dynamics that go into choosing the right paint for you, um, or the person that you're getting them for. And so today will be the first part of that series, and we will be talking about paints for children and kind of what's a good fit for them and kind of how to know when it's time to move them up in quality and the pros and cons of each paint. So let's jump down to my studio and we will start talking about watercolors. Hi guys, so now that we're down in my studio, let's talk about watercolors for children. The first one we're going to talk about is probably the one you've seen the most of. This is just a generic Crayola watercolor palette. This is the 8 colors set. This is kind of dirty because this is one that my kids use regularly. It comes with a paintbrush that's currently missing from mine. It's probably in our big cup of paintbrushes in their art supply box. But these watercolors are really inexpensive and they are great for children. If you are looking for an affordable watercolor, I would suggest the Crayola ones. Anything I found that's lower cost than the Crayola ones are so anemic in color that you really struggle getting the color saturation that you want. Crayolas re-wet pretty easily, they have a good vibrancy, and they are at a great price at about, they're like $2, but in the fall you can find them for about $1 a piece. These are great for children that are young enough to start painting, 1 and up, I guess. That's when about my kids started using them. Kids that age tend to care more about just the process of painting and doing quantity and instead of quality. They're just there to have a good time and explore and experiment, and these allow them to do that without the stress of them using the paints too quickly or ruining them. Kids this age tend to use a lot of water, and these paints will dissolve. You need to make sure that you leave them open to dry, else they will get gooey and they'll run out of color a lot quicker. These are also really good paints for older kids. I used Crayola watercolors until I was in my 20s. I used them typically for line and wash type paintings where I would draw a design with like a Sharpie or another type of waterproof pen, and then I would do washes of color over the top, or I would do reverse where I did the watercolor and then do the inking over the top. And so these work really well for that. I always liked how vibrant they were. I typically would get the 16 set, so I had a little bit more colors to choose from, but they work nice. Now, these are a little bit more difficult if you want to start layering your paints. If you want to kind of go back in and add more layers to add more details, because these paints have so much filler in them, like most lower quality paints, that they will relift from the paper easily, and so you will disturb the layers underneath it and mess them up. But I highly recommend these paints if you are a beginner, if you're a card maker just starting out, you can use these paints. Now, a sign that your child is ready to kind of move on to the next level of paints is that they are wanting to do more detailed work. They are trying to make something more realistic. Now, granted, this is still at a kid level, so it's not going to be perfect, but they have the desire to work and spend more time on one piece. Another sign that they might be getting ready to kind of move up is that they have better brush control. So they are dipping their paintbrush in water and then into their paint and then maybe mixing it or putting it directly on the paper, but they're not over soaking their paints with too much water. Another way to tell is that they are just spending more time painting. Most kids, when they're little, like to do art. They like to be creative, but about 5 or 6, you start seeing kids that really, really, really love art and could color all day long, and you see the kids that they'll do it when it's raining or there's not much going on, but it's not their first choice of activity. So the kids that are really starting to get into art and be interested in it, that's another way to tell that they're ready to move up in quality. So the next palette I would recommend would be this Prang set. This is the set, let me pull it up. This is what elementary schools use, and all the way up through high school. It's a really good middle of the ground set without too much cost. I've got a similar color setup to the Crayola. These palettes have big oval palettes so you can pick up the paint easier. They re-wet super easy, and they've got better color saturation than the Crayola ones. These can be a little bit chalky when they dry, but it's nothing like too, like Artist Loft tend to dry chalkier than these. So these are a good middle of the ground. I bought this set for about $3 or $4 from Hobby Lobby. It comes with a pretty nice paintbrush. Mine is buried in the watercolor brush cup for my kids' art supplies, but this works pretty nice. Here is kind of a more close-up. Let's see if I can show you without too much of a glare. This is kind of the swatch I took of them. You can see that they're a little bit shiny where it's dark. That's probably one of the biggest complaints I have with these, is if they are applied too thickly, especially in 1 or 2 layers, they will get really shiny like this and have kind of a shellac finish. So that's just something to be aware of. Other paints do it, like the Gonzai Tombi ones. These paints I would recommend for about 6 years old on up. You can get the 16 set, and that is a really good one, especially once they start getting a little bit older, to give more color options for mixing. This is a little bit dirty because I was using it a little bit ago when I was working on sample painting to show you, but it's got some decent mixing wells. You got a big one and then a couple small ones, and then the nice thing about these is it's a sturdy palette, and it makes it so you can reuse it. You can pull out the colors in here, and you can buy replacement colors. So if you have a lot of kids and they are painting a lot, or you are teaching art lessons to children, these are a good solution. You can buy the pans of paint, or you can take these out and refill them with a different paint of your choice. So this allows some flexibility as you're progressing, and you don't have to keep rebuying a palette over and over again, which is a nice benefit. The painting I did with these, I didn't do one with the Crayola ones, but this is I don't know if I can show you without too much of a glare, but this is the painting I did with the Prang sets. It reminded me of when I was painting in high school and first learning how to use watercolor. High school was when I first started liking watercolor, and it was because I was using these paints instead of Crayola. So it was my first experience really starting to layer paints and getting detail on paints without relying completely on pen and ink. The only real struggle I found with these is the shiny issue, and you can't do too many layers with them. If you do a lot of layers, you'll start picking up the layers underneath. So you just have to be careful with how you layer. The good thing about that is if you kind of get an area too dark, you can re-wet it and kind of scrub it with a stiffer brush and pat it, and you can get your highlights back. So there's pros and cons to this, but it's really inexpensive and it's a great way to move up. Now, you can use these as an adult. There's no shame in using these paints. If you are just kind of a hobbyist and you don't have a lot of money, or your kid likes watercolors all right, but isn't their favorite medium, it is perfectly all right to just have this or the 16 color set and not buy more expensive ones. Maybe get them a couple paintbrushes that are a little bit better so they have more options when painting. But you can stop right here, and that's perfectly all right. But if your kid really likes watercolor and really wants to start improving their skill, and they're showing a lot of interest, typically around like 12 years old, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later, the kids that are still really into art kind of separating themselves more. They really start wanting to paint realistically or learn a specific style like manga, and they might want better supplies to make that a little bit easier. You can do great work with this, but it gets a little bit easier having a little bit nicer paints. So if you got a kid or a teenager that's wanting to learn a little bit more and do more, then I would suggest the Koi watercolors. Let me grab them. This is a good one for kind of that teenage age where the kids are about 12 years old or older and they're really wanting to improve their watercolor skills and learn more. So this is the Koi watercolors pocket filled book sketchbook. I bought this for about $23 on Amazon. It's got, sorry, that's my, if you heard that, that's my kids playing outside while my husband is doing some yard work. But this set has some nice palette mixing space. You can also mix up here if you want more. The palette comes with some nice sponges to wipe your brush on. You get a really nice water brush. If you're not familiar with the water brush, is it holds water in here, and then you kind of screw it together, and then the water will drip out of the brush, and then you can use it to wet your paint and squeeze it, and you can keep a nice steady stream of water going. It's really nice for traveling, or if you have a kid who paints everywhere. When I was a teenager, I painted all over the house. I didn't have like a designated art space, and so I painted in the kitchen, I painted on the couch with the TV stand next to me, I painted in my bed. I did art everywhere, and a water brush like this is really nice because then you don't have to worry about a cup of water that's dirty mixed with paint tipping over and spilling on carpet. So this is kind of a good solution if you have a kid that loves painting everywhere. Now on to the main part, the paints. I have been using this palette pretty regularly since I picked it up in January. And you can see I've hardly even used any of the paints on it. This is the color swatch I did of them. And you've got a nice variety of colors, and most of them are really translucent. The only ones that are kind of opaque are the Naples yellow kind of color, the white, this olivey green, and this ochre. Ochre is commonly opaque, and that's one of the good qualities about it. So that's not too much of a concern. The rest of the colors are very vibrant. They're fairly translucent. This is like a Payne's gray, and this is a black. You just can't really tell this is a Payne's gray because I did the swatch so dark. But they layer really nice, and you can get a lot of nice effects with it. I like how you get a couple warm reds and a couple cool reds. Same with the blues, and you've got some nice options with your greens and your yellows to really allow you to mix. This is the painting I did with the Koi watercolors. Kind of pull that up so you can see it a little bit better. But I was able to layer a lot more color on here, do a lot more glazing. I still had to be careful not to pick up the paint that is on the bottom layers as much, but I could get a lot more detail easily than I could with the praying set. Both are really nice options, but if you or a child want to really improve their skill, this can really be a good option. Now, some drawbacks to these. They can get a little bit of shine. There's a little tiny bit of shine. I don't know if you can see it very much on here, but where the paint's applied really thickly, it got a little bit shiny. That's fairly common with watercolor, so you just have to keep an eye out for that. And another drawback with this set is when it's sold in like a big box store like Hobby Lobby or Michael's, they are overpriced for what you get. A lot of times in those kinds of stores, this set with 24 colors is between $30 and $40, and I don't think it's worth it at that price point. But if you can get a coupon that drops it down to the $20, $24 range, or you buy it online at that price, then this is a good set. So try to keep it where you're paying $1 or less per color that you order, and this will be worth your money. So this is kind of my introduction to like watercolors and kind of when to know how to move your kids up. So, you know, kind of recapping, Crayola is a good entry-level set. For young children, 1 and up, you can use it all the way up until you're older. You can use it, it's really nice for line and wash type pieces of art. When you get kids that are a little bit more interested in art and want to improve their skill and do more detailed watercolor, but they're still pretty young, the praying set's a good solution. So that way, so you can kind of see the detail on that. This is a good one. Also for kids that are really into art but may not be big into watercolor and just need a basic watercolor set at a low cost. This is about $1 to $2. This one is about $3 to $4. You might find it for $5 somewhere, but $5 or less is a fair price for this. This one's a little bit more money at $23, but you get a case that can be reused. Oh, I forgot to mention that. When you use up all the paints in this, you can get 2 paints and squirt it in there and let it dry, and then you've got, you can just keep refilling this if you want, if you really like this palette box. But this is a good one for when you start getting the teenagers or older children that are about 11 and older who want to really start getting more serious about their artwork. This is a good set for that. None of these are really light fast, so you need to keep that in mind. You can hang the artwork up and it should last for a while. The koi and the praying ones I think have a slightly better light fastness than the Crayola, but you will still get colors fading, especially on the more vibrant ones if hung in direct sunlight. So that's just something to kind of keep an eye out on. If your kids make a really cool piece of art, make sure you're not hanging it in direct sunlight, and just treat it cautiously. And kind of comparison between the praying, this is the praying picture, and this is the koi one. I spent about the same amount of time on each one, but the effects I was able to get kind of were very dependent on the quality of the paint. But if you have any questions about the paints and how you can kind of help your kids improve, or you want to learn something more like about what paintbrushes are a good deal and are robust enough to withstand children using them, let me know and I can do a review and a discussion on those. If you like this video and want to learn more, please hit the like button and hit subscribe. That really helps my channel and allows me to create more videos for you. Thank you.